and which caused a lot of kerfuffle amongst the right-wing commentarians. So I suspect they decided they'd do the death of Mark Scott to counterbalance. But it is rather macabre, isn't it, to see an obit broadcast while someone is still alive and comparatively kicking.
Well, thank goodness for the chasers, and not an awful lot on television to watch these days. The Gruen transfer I love.
How many times have you been sacked?
Well, not nearly as many as Darren Hinch. I was sacked from... I got myself sacked from 2GB. We rorted that with John Singleton. When they wanted to change me from morning radio back to being an afternoon disc jockey, and I put Singer on the air, and I said, what do you think I should do? And he said, can you use the four-letter word on the ABC? He said, 2GB management don't know what they're doing. I'd tell them to go fuck themselves. Now, I had to look up, because in those days we had the 7-second delay. I knew we were going to do it, but fortunately the technician didn't press the button. So I was taken off there. The amazing thing is that Singleton now owns channel 2GB, the owning. Then, some years later, I'm at 2UE, and as you say, I don't wear earphones.
Well, I didn't point that out to the listener. I've never had a guest that doesn't wear earphones, and certainly not a presenter. I've never seen a radio presenter without earphones.
Well, I used to dislike it so much that I had what they call little feedback, a little speaker behind me. So when I did do talkback, it didn't feedback as it can do. And that was my trouble, because when you pressed the microphone, as we all know, the speaker cuts out. It didn't, because there's... And I'm talking to my panel operators in a different office, and I'm playing Mamma Mia. It was January, March 1983, and it's a specific time. And I've told him he's a fucking idiot. Just as Mamma Mia dropped in, I was fired the next day. But there was a reason they wanted to get rid of me anyway. It was the very week that Bob Hawke became, they stood down and Bob Hawke led the Labour Party.
Yeah.
And the other fellow...
The drover's dog.
Yes.
Bill Hayden.
Bill Hayden, yeah, stepped down. And Lawsy had been on before me. He was on 9 till 1. He worked 4 hours, and I worked 5. And I did 4 hours of an afternoon. He did a survey of his listeners who showed that 87%, if there were an election, would vote for the Liberals. I think they're still Liberals then?
Yeah.
And
I'm having a seance with Bob Rogers, and we're raising the dead. We're raising hell about the dead, otherwise we'd be buried in libel actions.
Would you like me to tell you about the Beatles experience? Because people...
No, I'd hate you to. Yes, please do.
It's just that I suppose people consider that is the most fantastic thing of my career. In many ways it was. But it was also part of one of the most, like my saying, I didn't like talkback, and I didn't say it had no future, but it had no future for me in 1967.
Well, you got that right.
Yes. But touring with the Beatles, I had an agreement to interview them every day, and they were absolutely wonderful. Every day, and fortunately they had a sense of humour. And we did that for, I think, 4 weeks. But when it was over, after about 5 or 6 weeks, I knew in my head that they were so overexposed that people in 12 months' time would want never to hear of the Beatles again. And I didn't keep anything. I didn't keep it. We used to sit up nights forging their signatures for all their fans. And I often...
So think about that, listener. If you've got a precious bit of memorabilia, the signature for Ringo or John or Paul or George was signed by Bob Rogers.
But people pay $100,000 a pilot because he had the Beatles' signatures on some... And I wonder if it was mine or not.
So nothing.
I kept nothing. And every time I say, 500,000 or 200,000 for this, not one thing did I keep.
Were you close friends with them by the time this ended?
Mostly with John, closest to John, least with Ringo, always thought was a bit of a dope.
So did they.
And I still think he is, I suppose. George was a bit aloof, but it was John and Paul, and they were the creative ones anyway. that I was closest to, but I still have trouble coming to the fact that, and I have, the one thing I did keep are the interviews I did, or the station kept them. And I have an interview where we're wishing Paul McCartney here in Sydney, on wherever it is in June, his happy 22nd birthday. He's just turned 70.
Doesn't it give you a shock to see Paul, this wizened old prune, in the opening of the London Olympics? I can't adjust to that.
No, I wonder why he keeps doing it. Dyed hair and all.
Going back to the Beatles, it must have come as a great shock there, and when John was assassinated.
I was playing tennis at White City, I think, and they phoned me and told me that. Yes, an absolute tragedy. But
That's the dark side of celebrity, isn't it? Or one
Yes.
of the dark sides.
Yeah.
Doesn't get darker.
By strange coincidence.
Unless you have a time machine and you can actually go around every single country and see what's going on everywhere, it's a little bit of a long boat. The authors do say, they have all the caveats that their findings disagree with others. Yeah, I'm as yet unconvinced. You are so unconvinced. I'm hiding it well, aren't I? Well, it's good. You're just saying not enough evidence, you guys. It's too much conflicting evidence, really. Too much conflicting evidence. Look, we were going to talk about a seal. We haven't got enough time. Can seals eat your holiday? Apparently they can. And would you want it back? That is the big question. Google it, guys. Hey, you've been a great guest. Thanks for coming on. Pleasure. Dr. Mira McKinnon is from the Australian National Centre for the Public Awareness of Science. This is Arundel. After ABC News, we're going to be joined by June Oscar, who's the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner. Families and suicide being another alternative, another option to escape the depressing situations that some of these children are exposed to and families are living and grappling with each day. So that is a huge concern to me, that we are continuing to see children take their lives to escape the desperate and dire situations that many of these families are living in across the country. Commissioner, are you worried that there isn't enough attention being put on this issue, that a national strategy, a national intervention, as you say, a crisis situation, something isn't being developed to deal with this immediately? What's missing, in my view, is the true engagement of people on the ground in these communities, the families that are living with layers and layers of challenges each day, and what are their needs, what are their thinking around how they can be supported and empowered to drive and design with the expertise brought into the community that is based in the community and provided through some of the perspective, from living in an Aboriginal community, from being impacted by suicide in my own family, so I can speak about what that experience feels like, and I'm sure this would not happen in this way, or the responses that we have seen, and the lack of accountability, the lack of engagement of families, I don't think we would see this in any other community. Next week the Governor will deliver the Closing the Gap report.